All right. So I organized today's equity strategy and collaboration call for midwifery educators to provide us with an opportunity to collaborate and learn from one another as we seek to implement change. Thank you all so much for joining. As you can see on your screen, a few people, let me just make sure I have the right screen here. We do. A few people have found the Padlet tool that I thought I would introduce you all to. It's a neat free platform that you can use in your classes or your organizing, especially if you are teaching or working from a distance. So a few of you have posted introductions of yourself here, and I have also posted some information here about the next scheduled call and about upcoming webinars. As well as a very brief follow-up survey that we would love for you to fill out after the call so we can incorporate your feedback for next time. We won't spend time using this Padlet now, but if you're curious to check it out after the call, you can find the link in the reminder emails that will be sent out, as well as in the chat box inside of GoToMeeting right now. For future calls, to introduce yourself, you just click on the little pink plus button at the bottom and then type. In addition to those of you who are here today, it looks like we have about 23 folks on the call, which is great for a summer day when everyone, lots of folks are on vacation, so that's great. But there are many people who have expressed interest in these calls and webinars, including more than half of the accredited midwifery schools in the country, representatives from that, as well as people from over 35 states. So it's good to be connected with you all today. We look forward to a good call. Before we get started, I want to let you know that I will announce the rest of the webinar series, the Equity and Midwifery Education webinar series, at the end of today's call. But you can find the information on the website, and a sneak peek of the dates is September 21st and November 17th around the same time of day. So we hope that you could plug in for those as well. And our next call for midwifery educators will be on Friday, October 6th. So we're going to switch the day of week, but we'll keep the same time of day. And so we hope you can join for that as well. And we'll be announcing what the theme of that call is as well through emails. So finally, we would also at the end of the call, like I said, like to request your feedback. It's just a very short survey. We hope you'll have a chance to fill out. And so without much further ado, let's move on to our topic for the day. This call is very much designed as a space where we hope you will ask questions and share ideas. But when you aren't talking, we would ask that everyone please mute yourself for sound quality. You can type questions or comments in the chat box inside of GoToMeeting at any time, and our facilitator, Marika, will be reading them and helping to bring them into the conversation. We can also unmute everyone at the beginning of at various points, actually. And that way the callers who can't use the chat box will also be able to participate. But while we have our brief sort of 5-minute presentations from our presenters, we may need to mute folks just for sound quality. We have several educators who will help us get the conversation started today. They will share their perspectives and some information about scholarships that they have either started or know information about how to organize scholarships in your own programs. And so please do get your questions going. They will be happy to answer questions and have a conversation. So today our topic is mostly about scholarships, but also to discuss financial aid for increasing access to midwifery education for underrepresented midwifery students and apprentices. All right. So first, I would like to start with Marika. I'm going to put up a little bio of everyone, and we won't read the entire thing, but what this will allow you to do is to get a sense of who it is that is talking. Marika is both my co-facilitator, and she will be our first presenter today. She is a licensed midwife with over 30 years of experience in private practice and also as an educator. So as you can see, she's done many amazing things. She currently serves as president of the Wisconsin Guild of Midwives. And it's in this capacity that she's going to tell you a little bit today about what they have done as a state organization. They have created a scholarship for aspiring midwives who are underrepresented in midwifery. So Marika, if you'd like to share a little bit about that, and then we'll be going on to our other speakers as well after that.
Thank you. Well, I hope I'm not going to take 5 minutes because I really have a small piece of what I think lots of different organizations are doing in our country. So the Guild, the Wisconsin Guild of Midwives, has had a long interest and commitment to racial justice and have had numerous workshops, ongoing conversations, and we have a standing committee on social and racial justice in our organization. And a group or a number of us went to the Arlie Center for the NACPM Summit, where I felt like there was the very direct ask from different midwives of color that one of the things white midwives and white midwifery organizations and schools could do is to offer scholarships, and to have those scholarships be very specifically targeted to communities of color and to other groups that are potentially disenfranchised in midwifery education and in those opportunities. So we brought that back to our committee, and our committee proposed that the Guild itself would offer scholarships to students or midwives based on a list of criteria. And we decided to have it be the application come in twice a year so that we could disperse funds twice a year. And this is really small pockets of funds. We're not an educational institution, we're a professional association. So we decided we would do $1,000 every 6 months. And we spent quite a bit of time. I think it took us over a year to come up with criteria. We had some pushback that we had to overcome, and we really protected the primary ask that it be in response to women of color or people of color pursuing primary midwifery education in our state. So the first priority was specifically to persons of color and primary midwifery education. The second priority was given to midwifery students or temporary permit holders, which is a licensing status here in our state that basically says you're a student that had commitments to serve in underserved populations in our state, and then we delineated who those populations were for the sake of the scholarship. So communities of color again came first, low-income families, plainclothes communities. We have about 50% of our births are within the Amish population, so that was a priority. And then any other community demonstrating a need for midwifery care. Third priority we were giving to students, period, in support of primary midwifery education. And fourth priority would be for already licensed midwives or guild members working to expand midwifery access in the state of Wisconsin. So those were our criteria. And the one exclusion that we said we would not do is we wouldn't pay for people to obtain equipment or supplies. We also have a transportation fund, so we do refund students and midwives that are working for the Guild in any capacity around the state. So that's sort of a separate thing though. So that's kind of what we do. We assess in December, and in June we offer the scholarship to either one person per 6 months, or to, we might split it up into 2 people or more if that's appropriate.
Hi, I'm just joining the call. My name is Trinisha Williams. I'm a midwife in the New York City area.
Hi, Tanisha, welcome.
Hi.
Thanks so much for coming on. Yeah. Tanisha, were you just introducing yourself, or do you also have a question for Marika?
No, I just wanted to introduce myself because I know you guys, I'm a few minutes late. You might have already started.
That's great. Thank you so much.
So I see a question. Sorry. Is it okay to jump right into the questions?
Perfect.
Okay, so I see a question from Julia Kessler, and she's saying, does the money come from membership? So we have both membership dues, and we also have people who do targeted donations. So in addition to our dues, you might say, I want to put some money into the scholarship fund, or we have a legal defense fund. We have a number of different funds that you could say, this is what we want to donate money to, and then you as an individual or as a practice could donate to. And some people do that. Any other questions? And I guess what I would say too is we've had a sort of a thriving interest in that scholarship fund, and we established a committee to go through the applications and to sort by criteria. And what, of course, we're learning as we go, this is our second year, maybe third year now, is that it's hard. It's hard to figure out who most closely meets our criteria for funding. And so the committee is often really working hard on figuring out that and making those decisions.
Hello, I had a question.
Sure, go ahead.
How is the money, the scholarship dispersed? Is it paid directly to the student? Is it paid directly towards the school for tuition? And how is that tracked?
That's great. That's a great question. And I'm not on the scholarship committee, so I don't actually know the answer to that question. I believe it goes directly to the student or the applicant. And I believe that there is a feedback loop where they do report afterwards how they use the money and how it benefited them. But I wouldn't say that we have a verification or a direct check and balance. Okay.
If you need more information too, it might, I don't know if there's someone who could be emailed maybe at the Guild who, if anyone is wanting to do this at their state association level and has, some more specific questions for your scholarship committee. I don't know if there's anyone who might be a contact that we could share, Marika.
Yes, absolutely. And I believe that's on our website or our Facebook page, probably our website, under our officers, I think, or under, I would have to look it up, but people are welcome to contact me. I'm not the person, our vice president is the person that handles the scholarship committee.
Great, thank you, Marika. That's a perfect idea. I'll put that link in the chat box as well to the Wisconsin Guild of Midwives. And excellent. I'm just getting a reminder. So anyone who's calling in on the phone, we don't have control over muting you. So if you don't mind, please just muting yourself if you're not talking. And that really reduces any background noise. Thank you. It looks like we have another question in the chat box.
Oops, I lost my chat for a minute. So Cheryl's asking, how active is our committee, about how many hours and how many people committed to that committee? I think we have 3 people on that committee, and I don't know how many hours they spend. We basically collect applications throughout, say, the fall or the spring, and then in December, those applications are amassed and considered as one group, and then again in June. So I imagine the bulk of the work is in December and June before those decisions are made. I believe there's a little bit of back and forth with the applicants if there's a point of clarification that needs to happen. I don't think it's a very, it's not a year-round activity other than to send out applications if people don't know how to access them electronically.
Great, and I just posted that link. Yeah, and you can also, from there, you can find, I think, the committee or the officers as well. Looks like there was maybe one more question. I'm not sure, from Jocelyn about the criteria. Do you feel like we already answered that, Marika? I'm not sure.
I don't see it.
Do you share more? Can you share more about your criteria for offering scholarships?
Yeah, so we really had to, the part that was important to a number of us was to hold on to creating an opportunity for people of color to become midwives in our state, and that we're largely white as an organization. We're largely serving white populations. We're not yet part of any kind of solution to what is one of the most egregious birth outcome disparities in the country. I think Wisconsin has the dubious reputation of being the worst state to be born Black in. And so we wanted to hold on very, very strongly to growing our midwifery pool of midwives of color. And so there was a challenge to that because people were like, well, what about other low-income midwives? What about people doing this? What about people doing that? And what we held on to was that there are supports for other populations, like within the Amish, serving the Amish. We have strong support for serving the Amish and also growing the capacity of Amish birth attendants in our state. So we really were able to hold on to prioritizing students of color to be first and foremost in line for any scholarship funds, regardless of, and we were very clear, regardless of financial need, that was not the issue we were necessarily rectifying. You know, we're really trying to address racism in all of its ugly forms, and that financial need was a separate category. Does that answer your question? I can't see your question, so I don't know.
Yes, yes, this is Jocelyn. Thank you. The reason I'm asking is because we are looking at implementing a similar program in California. And some of the things, thanks. Some of the things that come up are not only addressing the disparities of health outcomes among birth with people of color, but also medically underserved areas, which there are many. And whether or not, if, say, somebody worked in a very rural white area, if they could have access to that scholarship, or if they would have to somehow report to us that maybe they serve a specific community for a year or two after they become a midwife. Do you do any tracking like that?
We don't, although we're a small enough or connected enough state that we kind of know each other pretty well. We don't do rural support, partly because we feel like that already exists. So we've been we're really sort of narrowly focused on growing our midwife of color population.
Great, thank you. That really helps.
You're welcome. There's quite a bit of background noise somewhere, like a clapping or tapping sound. I wonder if someone has windshield wipers going that they could mute.
I hear that as well. And I wonder if it was my mistake by trying to sign on, but then I signed off again as an extra. So yikes. Hopefully, it sounds like it's gone. Good.
Yes. Whatever happened.
Whatever happened, it's improved. Thank you. All right. Well, it looks like those were the questions for that section. I think we'll go ahead and move on to the next person who's going to talk, and then we can always come back to questions for Marika or about, organizing a scholarship from your state association. Rachel, I believe that you have made it on. She had a lab. She had college or nursing school or something this morning. Are you on the call yet, Rachel? Give her a chance to unmute herself. And we can always come back to her. It looks like you're on, Rachel. Do you need help unmuting yourself, maybe? I think I've unmuted you, Rachel. Are you there? Rachel?
She looks like she's still muted on my end.
Ah, okay. You need to unmute yourself, Rachel, it looks like. Do you know how to do that? Sorry, technical difficulties. Of course, we practiced, but we can always come back to you, Rachel, but I want to give you just one more second here to try to, it looks like you're reconnecting your audio. Okay, great. We'll give you a second here to get on. Well, I can tell you all a little bit more about Rachel Williams. You can read also about her here. She currently works for Mercy in Action's midwifery school's scholarship program. So she's going to tell us a little bit more about that. I wonder if she's able to reconnect here. Okay. We can. Is that you, Rachel? Well, maybe we'll come back to Rachel and I'll try to text her and find out if she's having technical difficulties. Let's skip ahead for the moment to Susie Myers, who has been a midwife for more than 30 years and was co-founder of Seattle Midwifery School. Currently is the department chair at Bastyr University. And she's going to talk a little bit about creating a scholarship fund and what that looks like. And, you know, she can answer some technical questions about that as well, since, you know, she's helped to create it and fund that. Susie, if you're able to come on.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Thanks a lot for the invitation. This is a really important subject to me personally, as well as I think the future of our profession. So I'm really indebted to all of you for joining in this conversation. So I guess by way of background, I'll just say that the history of our scholarship fund really emerged as we merged in 2009 the Seattle Midwifery School, which is a independent nonprofit program. We made a strategic decision to merge with Bastyr University in 2009. And one of the things that came out of that was we had a donor base, a pretty well-developed donor base over 30 years to keep the doors open at Seattle Midwifery School. And that kind of fundraising for operations went away when we merged with this accredited university. So that was an asset. The liability that we acquired when we made the merger was that the tuition for our program went up significantly.
Okay,
Thus,
so
the need for
creating
scholarship.
when should we have that done by?
Okay, we're getting
somebody-
background noise.
BSR binders, we could put that in there.
Mhm.
Sorry,
I'll just-
Susie.
That's
We're,
okay.
We're hearing someone else's voice. Are you still there?
I'm still here. Should I
Okay,
just keep going?
I think that voice stopped, so you go.
Okay. So when we merged, the kind of last fundraiser that we had, we announced the formation of the Myers Midwifery Scholarship Fund, which was to honor me as a founder of the Seattle Midwifery School, and Joanne Myers-Seco, who was the executive director, had been the executive director for 25 years. And it was just a funny convenience that we have the same last name. We are not actually related to each other. So at that final fundraiser, just prior to the legal merger, we raised $36,000, which was the seed money for the scholarship fund, which we then brought to Bastyr. Since then, I have been feeding that fund by soliciting annually our donor base. And we've been very blessed to have not only small donors over these last 8 years, but we've also had a handful of major donors. So we have been able to bring in over $100,000 into this fund. And over the history of the fund, we've given away gifts, scholarships anywhere from $1,000 to $12,000. So that's kind of our background of how the fund got started and how we have sustained it. I do have, the university has a development office. They do help with the annual solicitation, but much of that is driven by me. And the university's financial aid office administers the scholarship funds, which are, we have our own Department of Midwifery Restricted Fund. There's also a general scholarship fund, and we get a portion of that every year, but it's much, much smaller than the amount that we have in our restricted fund to award each year to students. The fund has not to date been specifically and exclusively for students of color. That was the intention from the very outset, was to have our scholarship fund help to increase the representation of students of color, but we haven't restricted it to students of color. We have a number of criteria and a rubric that we use to score applications every year. The criteria are demonstrated commitment to serving in underserved communities, academic performance, demonstrated leadership in midwifery, financial need, and whether the student identifies as a person of color. Each applicant is scored on those different criteria. We also have a scholarship committee that is composed of myself and Wendy Gordon as the two faculty representatives. Joanne Meyer-Seco sits on our committee, and we've been adding graduates of the program who have been scholarship recipients to our committee. This year we added 2 more graduates who are people of color. So we now have 4 former recipients, 3 of whom are people of color and 1 of whom is white on the committee. And we're engaged in a really dynamic, very juicy kind of strategic conversation and re-examination of the priorities of the scholarship fund. So we hope to answer some pretty critical questions, one of which is, should the fund be exclusively for students of color? That's a question we will be addressing, and we're going to meet for several meetings this fall and hope to make some significant revisions by the end of December. So I'll stop there and welcome any questions that people have.
Susie, it's Audrey. Can you hear me?
Yeah, hi.
Hey, so one of the things that I heard from some of the MEEC schools when I was exploring, NACPM has been looking at also at developing a scholarship fund, as you know. And so I spoke with a number of administrators from the different MEEC schools. And one of the concerns that was raised about having a scholarship fund be exclusively for students of color is that if the school was getting federal funding, that could be a conflict. Is that something that you know about and can speak to?
It is not something I'm familiar with. My impression is that a restricted fund can be dedicated to any population that we choose. So, I mean, I would certainly want to consult with our financial aid officer. The director of financial aid here is quite knowledgeable about all of those restrictions. But I'm pretty sure that because our donors are, private individuals, that we can make those restrictions as we see fit. I think there are some ACNM folks on the call, and I know the ACNM Foundation has a dedicated scholarship for students of color because I've donated to it. So I don't know if anybody is on the call who could answer that question. No, okay.
Yeah,
there is a Midwives of Color scholarship available through the ACNM Foundation.
Mm-hmm.
Which may be slightly different than a school, potentially.
Yeah, this is Kristen. I'm going to go ahead and, while we're on the call, look up. I think that other institutions of higher education have scholarships like that. And so I'm just going to look that up, see if I can get the answer before the end. If not, I'll include the information in the follow-up email from the call. It's a great question.
Mm-hmm. Sounds good. Let's get to Courtney's question then. She says, I'm sorry if I missed this, but did you say how much the scholarship, whoops, I just lost you, how much the scholarship amounts are for and how many scholarships there are. And I think you did answer part of that.
The number of scholarships varies by the number of applicants every year. I didn't say, and I will say now, that right now the scholarship is only available after the successful completion of year 1 out of 3. So it's earmarked for students starting year 2 or year 3 of the program. That's another question that we are discussing in our planning meetings this fall. Should we have a multi-year scholarship available? Should we have a front door scholarship available to fund student through all 3 years? So we're going to be addressing that. We have the amount, we're budgeted a certain amount by the university's financial aid department every year. So we can spend up to that amount on awardees. And we do take a look at the merit of each applicant and decide how much and how many to award each year.
So there's quite a few comments in the chat. And so there are people saying, yes, there is a Midwives of Color scholarship with ACNM. There is Katie Moriarty saying Midwives of Color Watson Midwifery Student Scholarship is the basic, whoops, keeps jumping, basic midwifery student scholarship awarded to student midwives of color. The purpose of the scholarship is to increase the numbers of midwives of color through supportive scholarship awards, thereby increasing the number, quality, diversity of certified nurse midwives and certified midwives. And often finance is not admission or the barrier Victoria is adding. So scholarships are an important piece of increasing diversity. Vicky's saying we had a lawyer look into that for us and we're told that it was not illegal to dedicate scholarships to a particular group. At Mercy in Action, we do not give WOC scholarships, though we give to future midwives that are from the community in the US that are losing their babies at higher rates than anyone else, African American and American Indian, Alaskan Native.
That's probably a great segue, actually, and we can definitely, anyone can ask Susie more questions later if you have specific questions, about that scholarship fund. But it's probably a great segue, actually, to come back to Rachel, who I think was able to get reconnected. She got kicked off, of course, at the inopportune moment. But if you want to go ahead and try and unmute yourself, Rachel, you can tell us a little bit more about Mercy in Action's scholarship. It sounds like that would be good timing.
Sure, perfect timing. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Awesome. Sorry about the connection issues earlier. Yes, so I'm so excited to be on this call. I'm the Grand Challenge Coordinator for Mercy in Action. And I'm just really excited to talk about this because this is a big part of our organization and it's a big part of our heart. So if anyone's not familiar, Mercy in Action, we are a faith-based nonprofit that was founded by the Penwell family. So you saw Vicki Penwell talking on the chat here. And so we have a school here in America, but also Mercy in Action has charity clinics that they've helped found throughout Asia, Latin America, and also in Alaska. And so we have a program here that we do scholarships for our Mercy in Action College of Midwifery, but we also have scholarships as well to, we have had a lot of distance scholarships, which we're kind of phasing out now that we have our fully accredited MEEC school and, the direction that all of the MEEC schools are going. We also have scholarships available for our NARM study retreat as well. And so we started the scholarship back in 2012 just because we had a huge passion for seeing the disparities that were happening in America being addressed. I know most of you on this call are probably familiar with it, that African American babies are dying at 2 to 3 times the rate, of the national average, and then also that African American mothers are at 3 to 4 times than white mothers, and they're dying with birth complications. And so we just decided, we needed to not just talk about it, but we wanted to do something to address it. And so Vicki Penwell, along with Claudia Booker and Jenny Joseph, also started this. And we have, throughout the years, we've given, we are now up to about 72 scholarships that we've given out. So 7 of those have been full scholarships to our College of Midwifery, and 16 of those scholarships have been to our NARM study retreat. And then 24 of those scholarships have been to our distance academic program. And 25 of those scholarships have been to seminars and workshops. And so we're just excited, you know, we're continually learning as we go along this process. The full scholarship to our actual College of Midwifery, it's awarded, but it's also then evaluated on a semester by semester basis, you know, based on continued satisfactory academic progress, as well as them also abiding by our student code of conduct as well. So we've had some incredible students come through our school and then go on to get wonderful preceptorships, which is a big part of our passion, as well as helping them get connected. You know, we have a fund as well that we try to put out to receive donations sometimes towards helping with books or connecting. We have a library as well for students to be able to gain resources from as well. So we're trying to do whatever we can to eliminate any type of obstacle for students of color being able to come into the profession, because we really do believe that there should be a midwife for every woman. And we want to address these, so we want to bring more women of color into the profession. And so we get a chance to do that throughout our schools, and it's just been a real pleasure. And so I just kind of want to open it up to see if anyone has any questions as well, to see how we do it. We're happy to answer. Vicky's also on the call, so she's welcome to jump in as well.
Okay, so there's a comment here by Bastyr University. One of our callers has researched the topic of race-specific scholarships. This is back to that other conversation. You can offer race-specific scholarships, but they have to meet specific criteria if you receive federal funds. This link might help you, and she's posted a link.
Oh yeah, let me actually address that real fast. So we talking about funding as well. So our scholarships go to African American students, to Native American students, and to Eskimo students, which are Alaska Natives. So we have those specified because of the disparities like Vicki addressed, but our funding does not come from federal funding. All of our scholarships, we've never gone to outside resources for any of our funding. So our scholarships actually come from the funding we receive from our programs here in the US. So that comes from the trainings we do, from the paid tuition that we receive. We allocate some of that from within our budget to go towards these scholarships. So I'm not really sure exactly, because our school is set up a little bit differently where we aren't, you know, receiving federal funding, but that's how we fund ours. So we have the freedom to be able to specify them based on race.
I have a question for you, Rachel. So I saw in Vicky's statement that she said that you do not give women of color scholarships. So does that just mean that you're giving them very specifically to certain populations, like you just said?
We do. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So, I mean, it's definitely our heart. You know, we would love to be able to provide scholarships to every woman of color if we could. But right now, our scholarship is very specifically to address the health disparities that are happening in America. And so the highest mortality rates are happening among these 3 groups of color that we're specifically giving the scholarships to, so that we can raise up more midwives within the specific communities to serve women of their communities.
Excellent, excellent. And then Katie is also posting some scholarship information with an upcoming application, a due date for applications coming up very soon in October, that she's posted to the chat. I'm hoping people can see this.
And this is Catherine. I will also send out a follow-up email with all of the resources in the chats. So that'll go out to everyone on the list as well.
Excellent. And then Catherine's asking, can anyone comment on tuition rates at a MEAC accredited school or at MEAC accredited schools? A range is fine.
is, you know, we could obviously look on websites to answer that question, but we have a couple MEAC accredited schools three MEAC accredited schools on the call. So if you're comfortable kind of giving an idea for tuition, Amanda, you could tell us about Florida. Susie could probably tell us about Bastyr, and then Rachel, you might be able to tell us about Mercy in Action.
And Courtney's here from MCU as well.
Right.
This is Susie. We have, I think, the rare and enviable distinction of being the most expensive MEAC accredited school. I'm being facetious. So our university tuition here is about $75,000 for 3 years, and the students earn a master's degree in midwifery. Any other MEAC people want to say what their question is?
This is Courtney. We at MCU are at a $2,000 flat tuition rate per term, no matter how many credits you take. And the program length ranges from, on average, about 4.33 years to about 7 years at the maximum program length if you went super part-time. And our students graduate with a Bachelor's of Science for their direct entry programming. And then we also do continuing education at $285 per credit.
So what would be
Amanda.
I just wanted to ask Courtney if you could just do the math for us. What would be the total cost to complete the program, the range?
Let me tell you that in 2 seconds. I will do the math for you, and we can hear from Rachel in the meanwhile.
You know, is Vicki, oh, she's there.
Vicki just posted, I think the range is somewhere between 10,000 and 40,000. Mercy in Action College of Midwifery went up after we received MEAC accreditation, and now is 19,900 total. And Cheryl was saying that for MCU, it's now gone up to 2,200, I think, per term, Cheryl.
That's correct. We're about to go up to 2,200 flat rate starting in 2018. I did the math for our 2,000 range, since that's what we've been doing for the past. And if a student graduates in 4 years, which is the average, it's 24,000.
Okay, thank you.
And this is Amanda from the Florida School of Traditional Midwifery. Our tuition is $375 a credit hour, which is around $34,000 for tuition. And then we have additional fees, individual lab fees and that sort of thing that are also accounted for.
And this, of course, is just tuition, right? So we're not taking into account that people have to be on call 24/7 and might not be able to work and need to survive during that time.
Yeah. And then Catherine's asking about work-study programs. Do your schools have work-study opportunities?
And anyone from a CNM school could answer the question as well about work-study opportunities.
Mm-hmm. Bastyr University does have work-study. We haven't had very many students who, although eligible, have taken advantage of the work-study options here because of the, the difficulty of scheduling given preceptorships and our low residency model.
As far as I know, Mercy in Action, that we do not have work study. Feel free to correct that, Vicki, if a new thing has been implemented.
And Vicki's also posting that clearly it's become more challenging to give out 2 full scholarships a year now that MEAC is also charging per student, but that there's a strong commitment there at Mercy in Action.
And this is Amanda. FSTM is in the process of applying to be eligible for work study, which is a separate application, but it's on our radar and we're working toward it.
Is there anyone from a nurse midwifery school who can talk about whether it's common for students to do work study? I know it's certainly possible, obviously, at the larger institutions. I don't know how common that would be for students who are also trying to go to births and whatnot.
So we're getting some comments here. Melissa saying, not common, there's not much time in the program. Audrey has to drop the call. Julia is saying, at Georgetown, we don't have work study. We are a distance hybrid. And Amy's saying, although it's available, it's hard for students to schedule, as you said.
Mm-hmm. And that's probably true for all students. Maybe that is a good segue.
And that's the same thing with our program.
Is that right? FNU does not have, does not have work study. And we haven't had any at Shenandoah, but it would be an option as part of a financial aid package.
Thanks for those comments. It is helpful to hear what other students are doing. And if anyone doesn't know, FNU would be, I believe, Frontier Nursing University. And then MCU is the Midwives College of Utah. It sounds like Cheryl is saying there's some fellowship opportunities and they're looking into some other options. I was thinking that might be a good segue either for, I don't know, Rachel, if you would like to talk a little bit about it, or if Vicki, if you would like to kind of invite other schools, kind of reinvigorating that grand challenge, kind of talking about what that was and maybe inviting some other schools to consider it. So Vicki, she's saying, Rachel, you could do it if you're up for it.
Make sure we didn't lose Rachel.
Hi, this is Vicki. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
We might have lost Rachel again. So the original Grand Challenge was actually an idea that grew out of some of the crisis within midwifery that was happening back about 6 or 7 years ago. And of course, we were living overseas in Asia at that time, and we'd been scholarshiping students in the Philippines for decades. And so we got the idea to do it in the United States also for specific groups. And then I wrote actually an article that went out in Midwifery Today, and Claudia Booker saw it and got really excited about it. Jenny Joseph got involved, and we ended up co-writing something together and printing it, and was saying that we were just throwing it out to schools to try to figure out a way to put some scholarships together and get more, especially African-American women, into midwifery, so that maybe that would help with some of the disparity problems. So that's been about 6 years ago. As Rachel said, we have not looked for ways to fund it. We just subsidized it from what we were already doing. It's been growing slowly. There is a scholarship website that people can go to and say what they're doing. A lot of schools have started their own over the last few years, and so we just encourage everybody to keep this in mind. There really is two ways to look at it. One is a general Midwives of Color scholarship, just to have more diversity. But when we originally wrote it, this was very much a life and death thing. We were writing it to literally save mothers and babies' lives. And that's why within our organization, we really focused on African American, and then second, American Indian, because some of the other groups, such as Asians or Hispanics in America, overall have the same rate of losing babies as whites do. So we're not saying there's not a need for diversity, because diversity is just important overall, but this scholarship started specifically as a way to save lives. Yeah, there's something on the screen that shows that. We can put this website up, and anybody that is doing something, we would love for you to be listed. This is just a clearinghouse where anybody that was a potential midwife from one of these groups, and many of these scholarships are in general women of color, they could go and look and see what's available. So we're hoping that we'll really see midwifery in America looking much more like our general population, maybe in the next decade or two. And that will have an impact on that disparity will close, that gap between how many babies are surviving, how many mothers are, will start to close. So that's the challenge.
Vicki, this is Marika. Can I build on what you just said?
Please, go ahead.
So back to the Grand Challenge, there's an opportunity for anybody who offers services, educational services. It doesn't have to be a midwifery education program, but even like in my case, I offer NRP instruction, and I can give discounts on the Grand Challenge site to just announce that if anybody wants to take my course that's a person of color, I will give a discount or give free scholarships. And any one of us can do that are offering any kind of educational opportunities out there in the world. There's also an opportunity for people to donate toward student textbooks, I believe, and other ways that you can support students of color that are making their way into midwifery as a profession. Rachel, I see that you're back. Do you want to add anything?
I am back. I think she did a wonderful job. I also I guess I do want to add, you know, Claudia Booker, she has a great thing if you ever want to go read it on our website, just about the Grand Challenge. She has a postscript, but, you know, I liked what you just mentioned too about how being able to offer, you know, scholarships for NRP classes, but also being able to go raise awareness too, whether, you know, you're an alumni for school, you're connected with a school, even if you don't have a program directly that can give a scholarship, being able to go and to somewhere that you're connected and encourage others to, you know, to one, understand the disparities, and then two, become advocates to actually help change the disparities is a great way to be able to do something. And so whether that's going to, you know, maybe a school that you're connected with and encouraging them to think about offering a scholarship, even if it's not directly your scholarship that's going to be offered, figuring out who you need to meet with, you know, what kind of committee may be needed to be formed, but taking those kind of actions are different ways you can also be involved as well. And then, you know, in addition to, like, if you want to donate or to different programs, like I think that was Kristen, you had mentioned giving to a book program, things like that. There's just so many ways that we can all be involved, even if you don't directly have a school or directly have a program that you can actually give a scholarship to. Another way too, is if you're a preceptor, you know, becoming a preceptor and giving a scholarship to a midwife of color instead of charging fees. That's another way that you can be involved as well. So I just love that there's so many ways that we can all jump in to help solve this problem.
Nice. And Demetra, I see that you're posting a question. Do any schools have data on scholarship retention rates? How many students stay enrolled and graduate? And then also on that last view that Kristen had up, Claudia Booker is listed as a retention mentor. Could anybody speak to that?
So one of the things, this is Vicki again, that Claudia couldn't be here today because she's teaching on the farm, but she feels very strongly, as do I, that we need to have African American midwives especially that are being most affected by this issue on the committees or as working for the schools, things like being retention coaches, helping to just have a voice in all of this and really help everyone that's running schools to understand what's really needed to offer the kind of help that's going to be most needed, most effective, and then helping, as people are asking about retention, that really is a big concern. In our distance program, we found that we didn't have a very good rate of people actually graduating. I'm sure it was helpful for them to have some knowledge. We find a lot more effectiveness in our full college and in giving scholarships to our NARM study retreats and things like that. But it is important that we keep asking the communities that are affected by these bad outcomes in birth to keep giving input back into what is helping them to become midwives and actually go the distance.
Thank you. It looks like, Kristen, you're saying that there's another person who, Nancy's about to speak about this too. And then Katie is offering that, hang on, it's jumping around. Frontier Nursing has been awarded the Nursing Workforce Diversity Grant from the Health Resources from HRSA. The grant totals $1,998,000 in funding in support of a 4-year project that will be led by FNU with assistance from several key partners. And the goal is to increase access to high quality, culturally aligned advanced practice nurses and midwives. A lot of good information here too that I am sure that Kristen will send out.
Katie, is there anything you want to share? I would have had you be one of the other presenters if I had known how much great information you had to share. Thank you. Is there anything that you'd like to say out loud? I appreciate you posting so much in the comments. Well, I will share your resources, and I appreciate that information. And oh, she doesn't have her microphone enabled. Okay, well, sorry, Katie. Thanks so much for sharing. I will share your resources as well in the follow-up email. It's a great idea for us all to be thinking about what kind of grants we might be seeking to increase representation in our workforce. So thanks for that reminder. Since there isn't another specific question in the chat box right now, but again, you can keep asking questions of anyone as we go along, I think I'll ask Amanda from the Florida School of Traditional Midwifery to go ahead and talk a little bit about financial aid, because while financial aid is available to all students through nurse midwifery schools, it's not available at every direct entry midwifery school. So I asked Amanda to talk a little bit about what it means to be a Title IV school and how you get to that place.
Thank you so much. I'm really glad to be here. This is really a great conversation. I'm so glad that the Florida School of Traditional Midwifery is represented, and just looking forward to learning from you all together. I wanted to give a very brief background of the Florida School of Traditional Midwifery. We started enrolled our first cohort in 1995. We're established as a 501c3 not-for-profit school. We pursued MEAC accreditation, were accredited, and then pursued, I'm getting some feedback. I'm not sure if everyone can hear that as well.
It's someone who's on a phone. Yes, thank you. Whoever was able to mute, thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And then we pursued Title IV funding and Title IV application in 2009. It was awarded to us. I think everyone is probably pretty familiar with Title IV, but I just want to give a really quick high-level overview. Title IV funding is provided by the federal government under the auspices of the Federal Department of Education. And it's only available to students who are enrolled in eligible programs. And as mentioned before, certified professional midwifery programs were not always represented in the Title IV pool. The types of federal aid that you can get include loans, both subsidized and unsubsidized grants, and then also grants do not need to be repaid, and then also work study if you're eligible to offer work study. So to become a Title IV institution, just irrespective of all of the decisions that the school has to make about mission and vision and all of those things, there are some institutional eligibility requirements that schools have to meet if you're considering becoming Title IV eligible. So you have to be authorized in the state in which you practice, the state in which you operate. And that state authorization is unique to each individual state. You also need regional or national accreditation by an accrediting agency that is recognized by the Department of Education. So for most midwifery schools, this is MEAC accreditation, but also certainly there's other accrediting bodies who can accredit midwifery schools. Schools must also serve students who have high school diplomas or GEDs, or a specific portion of their students must have high school diplomas or GEDs. They have to have a program that meets the requirements, the requirements are very specific, and it depends upon which institution eligibility you're looking for, but specifically a program that offers a diploma or a degree. They must have administrative capability, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that, and also demonstrate financial responsibility. Usually that happens through audits. So I'm going to talk just a moment about administrative capacity, because this is a really important thing for midwifery schools that are considering pursuing Title IV funding. There needs to be basically an explosion in administrative capacity to be able to accommodate what happens for Title IV. So it's a very high volume job. There's a lot of specific regulations and requirements that have to be met, and it needs a very close eye on what is happening at both the administrative level and also then the national level as you look toward the horizon for changes that might impact your school. So as far as administrative capacity goes, the school has to be able to do electronic processing. There has to be a designated person for Title IV. And then there has to be an additional person who is in charge of disbursement of those funds. So awarding and disbursement have to be two separate people, two separate departments. Checks and balances have to be in place, a process for reconciliation. And then the final thing is to provide financial aid counseling to students who are eligible and accept financial aid, federal financial aid. So obviously Title IV comes with a lot of benefits, right? So it increases enrollment and matriculation from the program. It absolutely does reduce financial barriers for some students. It establishes pathways for students who otherwise would be excluded from midwifery education. It also provides additional layers of oversight, data collection, and then it also provides aid to all eligible students. So so merit-based scholarships are often awarded to not to students of color. So they are not represented. Students of color are not represented as frequently as students who are not of color for merit-based scholarships. So this is a way of sort of leveling the playing field, because all eligible students can get federal financial aid at Title IV schools. So for FSTM, this did play out. So the lessons that we learned, Title IV for us was a value add. It increased our enrollment by about 50%. It increased our successful matriculation by about 10%. It increased our diversity applicant pool and student pool, both SES students and increased our racial and ethnic diversity. And we also discovered that it provided us with the opportunity to look at our capacity and increase our capacity to accommodate Title IV. So the pitfalls of Title IV are great. And as FSTM was deciding whether or not to apply for Title IV eligibility, we kind of tossed around these pitfalls. Lots of conversation happened at the board, the Board of Trustees level. So Title IV brings with it great student debt burdens. So everyone on the call here today heard about the cost of tuition for individual programs. The student debt stays with the student, right? So when they graduate, they are now required to pay back any loans that they may have taken out. There's also an issue with aggregate loan limits. So once you reach a certain level of loan, the amount, you are no longer eligible to receive federal aid, depending upon the level of schooling that you're in. So this disproportionately impacts students who may be choosing midwifery as a second career, who have prior education with which they used loans, for which they used loans. And then sometimes the cost of tuition and living expenses and all of the other associated costs of going to midwifery school, including commuting time and transportation and gas money, all of these things outpaces the increases in loan limits, both yearly and aggregate. So that means that sometimes you take out the maximum amount of loans and then you still can't afford midwifery school. And then it's extremely expensive to maintain accreditation that's required for Title IV. We spoke a little bit about MEAC per pupil, per student charges or fees. So there are some Title IV pitfalls that can be avoided if you don't accept federal financial aid. So as FSTM looks back on almost 10 years of Title IV status, the one recommendation that we would make is that you should carefully consider your capacity to be able to manage the Title IV program. Ensure that there are adequate checks and balances in place within the administration of the school to make sure that you do everything exactly according to how the federal government needs it to be. And then make sure that you stay up to date on any changes that could impact student aid. So I'd like to open it up to any questions you guys might have about Title IV or about how midwifery schools become Title IV eligible.
And it may go without saying, but any of the nurse midwifery institutions that are operating, all of them are operating in institutions of higher learning, and a few direct entry midwifery schools do as well. That goes along, all of those are regionally accredited and have Title IV financial aid available to them. So just to be clear.
Absolutely. And I actually, that's one of the things that I'm glad you brought up is that regional accreditation, MEAC accreditation is terrific because it's midwifery specific, and regional accreditation is available to midwifery schools as well. So that might be something that if you are considering Title IV application that you would consider is a regional accreditation.
Amanda, this is Susie. Can you say that again? I don't, that's not my understanding that regional accreditation is a system within higher education in the United States, that the country is divided regionally and there are accrediting bodies, not, in other words, not a federal accrediting body, but they're regional. I don't think that that's true, that all MEAC schools can qualify for regional accreditation. Is that what you meant?
No, it's not what I meant. I was just saying that regional accreditation is an option for some schools if they chose it. No, it's not. It's certainly not something similar to what Seattle Midwifery School did, in partnering with Bastyr, the Institute of Higher Learning, pursuing that regional accreditation. That is something that schools could consider if they chose to, and it would depend on their individual region. No, it's not a federal. It's not a federal thing. It's absolutely regional.
Right. One thing I did want to just propose as I think a big challenge for our profession, those of us either regionally accredited or not. Those of us who do qualify for federal financial aid for our students, that, it's no secret that the debt burden for students across the board in this country is becoming just untenable. And I think that it's a big challenge for the CPM profession, certainly, to balance the debt burden against the earning capacity for a CPM. So this is like a bigger problem than just the individual educational institution and what resources they have to support students from varying backgrounds. So I'm really hoping that our profession as a whole can start, grappling with that compelling issue, because it's a threat to our, the future of the profession.
I totally agree with you. This is Amanda again. I completely, totally agree with you. I do think the debt burden is something that students need to be counseled very explicitly and specifically on. The earning potential versus, like, weighing the earning potential versus the amount of debt that you are going to arrive at the end of midwifery school with is certainly something that needs to be openly addressed, honestly addressed, and not glossed over. It's you know, the tendency, I think, for schools to, especially midwifery school, I think there's a level of passion in students that can sometimes cause a little bit of a myopic view of what happens next. And I think it's very, very important to have that very honest conversation with students who are choosing federal financial aid.
Mm-hmm.
And to be talking about, this is Kristen, just what are the things we can do to change what we need to change to make the profession more viable. I don't know if there are any nurse midwives or nurse midwifery educators on the call who would like to talk about this from the perspective of your students. Obviously, there's a higher earning potential when nurse midwives graduate, but the debt burden is still very high. And so, you know, that's why we started out talking about scholarships, really because for many students, the debt burden is a really big deal. But one thing that hasn't yet come up on this call that I was wanting to talk about is just the differences in accumulated wealth between our students. And it's another reason that scholarships are so important for our aspiring midwives of color and our aspiring midwives who want to serve, you know, from communities who are currently underrepresented in midwifery, because white families have a significantly higher amount of accumulated wealth to pass on to their to the future generation. And so even when you have families, you know, African American families or Native American and Alaska Native families who have potentially entered, you know, the middle class, they still have significantly less accumulated wealth because of historical racism to pass on to their future generations. And so it's another reason that scholarships are so important for our underrepresented students.
Vicky's adding that Southwest Tech is regionally accredited community college at community college pricing, and MEEC accredited too, and also saying that this conversation is really important.
I'd just like to add one thing here that I heard on a different call, because perhaps we can strategize together about how to fix the problem. Jenny Joseph, for example, many of us are familiar with her work in Florida, and her school, Common Sense Childbirth, isn't currently MEEC accredited and doesn't currently offer Title IV financial aid to students. It's really sad, I think, from my perspective, to see someone who is doing this really good work in an amazing way, who is really absolutely changing the outcomes we're talking about, who has eliminated disparities in the African American population that she and her colleagues serve. And yet, because they're so busy in the trenches doing the work, doing the really good work, they don't have the capacity, like Amanda was talking about, to become at this point, you know, in exact time MEEC accredited and to get that Title IV standing and to offer that access to students. While the debt burden is a problem, it still does open up access. And so I don't know if there's a way as a profession we can think about how to support midwives of color who are already doing this work as midwifery educators, but aren't able to offer that to their students. Maybe that's something we need to prioritize.
And I would add the cost of MEEC accreditation, not just the process. And you're getting some. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just saying the continuing cost of that, which drives tuition higher, which then requires additional debt burdens.
Yeah. So Victoria or Tori Baker is saying the accumulated wealth issue is very seldom addressed because there's no cushion to help people through that problem. It makes any problem while a student attends school a crisis. I encourage my student nurse midwives to teach. Educators can often have their debts paid for them, and also people are willing to work in underserved areas. I would add that. And then Vicki is saying, yes, this is a critical piece. We need to create sustainability on all levels. And another Vicki, sorry, there's two Vickies. Vicki Headley said that first piece. Vicki Penwell is saying we're helping Jenny Joseph on her MEAC accreditation application right now, but it is a long process. So Vicki's responding to that need.
And just in the interest of time, let me go ahead and allow Nancy to share with us what she has put together. It's going to take me a minute to pull up her slides here, but Nancy Anderson currently works in the Department of Midwifery at Bastyr University, which is funny enough spelled wrong in my document there. Sorry about that. And Nancy it has done some research related to this topic for the National Association of CPMs, Certified Professional Midwives. And you can access that entire presentation if you like, but she's going to spend just a couple minutes today talking to us about why scholarships alone aren't the only thing that we can do to increase representation in our midwifery workforce. And she's going to tell us a little bit about what she discovered during her research for that on that topic. So let me just pull that up for you, Nancy.
Thank you, Kristen.
I apologize here. It might take me a second. My goodness, sorry.
It's okay. You know what? I'll start on the first slide.
Okay.
So this is really a cut to the chase presentation of some research that I carried out in 2014. As Kristen says, it was sponsored by NACPM. And I'm going to offer a very brief summary of the objectives and methods in the study, some of the study results really concentrating on the non-financial aspects of the study results because we've had lots of good discussion about finance. And then the overarching recommendations that I gave for NACPM, the study sponsor. So, so this is slide 2, just so you know. So we'll start with slide 2. The objectives of my study were to explore the role of finance because NACPM, as well as everyone on this call and most other people, understand that there are real financial issues, that there's a lack of financial resources preventing women of color who are more likely to be lower income from becoming midwives. But in addition to that, the sponsor and we were also interested in understanding the other barriers to a successful entry into midwifery, as well as the strengths that may amplify the potential for a potential midwife to be successful in their endeavors. You can go to methods. Next slide, please. Just pull it up a little bit. There we go. Just briefly, in order to answer these questions, I conducted human subjects research to evaluate the themes and patterns in participant perceptions of need. I interviewed a group of 25 subjects who were a combination of midwifery advocates, practicing midwives, student midwives, and potential midwives. They were all self-defined as women of color. I also want to give a call out to the exceptionally helpful advice that I received from a true panel of experts, a number of whom have been already mentioned. Claudia Booker, Jenny Joseph, as well as Shafia Monroe, Keisha Good, Miriam Zoila Perez, and a variety of other resource people. I also discussed the needs of midwifery students of color with administrators of 8 midwifery education programs. Just in case I interviewed you and you haven't heard me call your name, it's because I can't. Because you were a subject of human subject research, but I really appreciate your participation. Okay, let's go to the results slide. So you've heard about scholarship and finance from the last speakers. I'd like to concentrate on needs beyond financial that I heard about and on a potential solution. So we all know that midwifery has a number of pathways to entrance, each with differing financial implications, as well as a variety of regulatory consequences. And first thing to note is that while all of the subjects or participants in this research noted that a number of organizations, MANA, NACPM, as well as ACNM and other organizations, are actually demonstrating new interest in workforce development. But few of them were satisfied with the kind of outreach that they received from organizations or schools in their pursuit of midwifery. And in fact, the exceptions, there were several exceptions, all pointed to the positive difference that outreach, whether formal or informal, can make to a woman of color who wishes to enter midwifery. For those who did succeed in entering midwifery education, they described facing a variety of other daunting obstacles. By definition, someone who is self-defined as a person of color or an ethnic minority, or now we would say a member of the global majority, differs in culturally prescribed ways from most of their classmates. And in the best of circumstances, that's going to be difficult. In addition, midwifery students of color are going to enter any of the chosen pathways as experienced survivors of racism from childhood, from previous education, and from their employment experiences. And their previous educational exposure may have occurred within institutions that were systematically deprived of adequate resources. So these students carry this reality on their shoulders when they begin their midwifery education. Given the load that they carry, they really need systematic support. While several participants did notice that there were some major improvements in faculty anti-racist training and even the presence of faculty and staff of color at some institutions, they had widespread perceptions that as students of color, they did not receive the support that they really needed. The combination of dissonance, isolation, and racism, in fact, can reach a zenith during the clinical preceptor locations because students have to travel many times and dislocate to an isolated location with few people of color and, in fact, live in close proximity and work many hours a day with preceptors who may have little to no training in either cultural humility or issues of power and privilege. Given all those threats to academic survival, it is very important, as previously stated in our webinar today, that students receive support in the form of mentorship. Mentorship becomes a key resource. It's the emotional equivalent of a life raft, in fact, for midwifery students of color. Of the 25 people who participated, 19 of them spoke of the importance of mentorship to their student lives, either in preceptor relationships or more informally. Let's go to the next slide. My results, and I've really summarized them here, described a variety of unmet needs. And analyzing the statements of midwives, advocates, students, potential students, and midwifery school representatives, and hearing what we heard today, I think we can all confirm that financial need is by no means the only unmet need that makes it difficult for students of color or potential midwifery students of color to enter the profession. Given those multidimensional needs, my overarching recommendation to NACPM during this research was that financial support really needed to be integrated into a kind of a package deal that includes elements of social support, peer support, and mentoring. I described this integrated support as having three components: financial, student selection, and infrastructure. Since you've heard a lot about finance, I'm not going to say any more about that. Let's go to the next slide. Since since this particular research was looking at the possibility of setting up an actual scholarship program, my research told me that student choice, or students who would be chosen for participation, would be very important. And a primary recommendation was that a panel of experts, similar to the panel of experts who helped me in conducting this research, would choose recipients for the integrated support, and that peer support, which my participants indicated was a widely regarded insufficient resource, would be built into the support program by choosing 3 students at one time to receive this integrated support and not just 1 student. I also recommended that the panel of experts use the general themes that were revealed by my research to consider and select students. To summarize, it was a real strength for the subjects in my research if they had had previous relevant experience so that they knew what was involved in midwifery. It also was a strength for them if they were firmly rooted in and connected to community, however they defined it. If they were more familiar with the variety of midwifery pathways. I'm getting that same interference again, but I'll keep going.
The phone callers, please mute yourselves. Thank you.
Okay. And if they were able to demonstrate what in educational circles people call grit. In other words, potential students who had really been able to remain determined against odds to their success thus far, tended to be happier with their degree of success in midwifery school, even if they weren't particularly happy with the school. Let's go to the next slide. And then the final component of the integrated support that I recommended was what is sort of the umbrella for infrastructure, which is to say that it would be very important for a scholarship program to develop mechanisms, formal mechanisms for mentorship, as well as the peer support that I talked about before. What that means is that mentors really need to be financed so that it's a part of their own financial sustainability as opposed to a financial drain. And then, of course, I teach measurement and quantitative methods and real intro to public health and epidemiology. It's really important, whatever program is set up, that you measure how well you're doing, that you conduct formal evaluation so that whatever program you set up can be changed as necessary to get the best outcomes. And then finally, final slide, we have to remember that supporting students, in fact, is not enough. My recommendations focus on student support needs, but of course, institutions need to create their own kinds of truth and reconciliation. The institutions that we're all a part of need to continue to ask ourselves hard questions about what cultural humility means. What is power and privilege? What is institutional racism? And all our institutions need to develop successful institutional responses.
Thanks so much, Nancy. I want to give people a chance to ask any questions or make comments. But I'm also going to include some links here in the chat box just for folks who do have to sign off exactly at 12:30. It would be so great if you could provide feedback on the call. So I'll include the link for the survey here, and I will send it in the follow-up email as well.
Vicki, I'm just reading what you said from far away here. This is why, as important as these scholarships are, there must be mentorship. Yes, that Claudia and Vicki are offering. Absolutely. Looking at the big picture, as you are here, will be the way that we can start to make a real difference. I think that we have to figure out ways to formally support people who are interested in mentoring and who have those skills, who we always point our students to anyway. But when we ask them to be mentors, we have to figure out ways to make it sustainable for them.
I think also just lifting up what you said, Nancy, about the school as a culture of its own, and also for the mentors and faculty at the school to really do our own internal work so that we've done some self-reflection and learning and study and change around our own racism, ability to have racism within ourselves and our institutions, and how do we confront and shift that culture so that we're providing mentorship and academic support that makes sense and is relevant and is humble.
Agree.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Oops, sorry.
Thanks, Marika.
And then Victoria Baker saying, much like this series, we need to come at these issues from many perspectives, many approaches. We don't have just one answer. Yeah, nicely put. Anybody else want to get in a last question or comment? And the other Vicky's saying, yes, the mentors need support too. Our organizations too looking at ourselves and having a critical conversation and taking action. Yeah.
Thank you, Vicky, and hi, Vicky.
I just want to add that I think as we all think creatively about how to tap into more financial resources, that some of those financial resources need to be directed towards mentors. I really feel like it's a valuable resource that has to be acknowledged and rewarded and sustained.
And then Julia's asking, how do we put a dollar amount on mentoring? It is priceless.
Indeed, but yet, you know, it's work also. And many of us know historically what it's like to have unpaid labor. So I think we need to change that paradigm.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I know MCU has a program specifically for mentoring students where students are assigned a person that they can turn to for support and help. And Cheryl, I don't know if you're still on the call, but maybe you could speak to that. And if there's anything that you do specifically around race, equity, and cultural relevance for those students that you support. I see you.
Hi. So we have a program at MCU called the House Mother Program, and we're looking at adjusting that name, but for now that's what it's called. And so we have 7 house mothers and a student support services. The student support service is a student who has a psychology degree, so she only serves students in really, really difficult situations. Students are grouped regionally. So we don't have students self-identify in any way before they're welcomed into the school on this level in order to group them into a house. So for example, we have a lot of students in Utah where our school is based, and so it makes sense to have them grouped together, and a lot of students in Washington as well. MCU is implementing racial literacy training for all of the staff and faculty. I don't know how long that's going to take, but I know that it's in the planning and in the work. And so the house mothers will definitely be part of that. And we also have at the school, we have courageous conversations that happen about twice a month. And one's an open forum topic where students and faculty and staff could come and discuss anything on their mind and on their heart. And then the other one is a focused topic. And we've had really wonderful presentations from various staff and faculty in that as well. And the focus topics can really be about any any type of discrimination, but it's meant to focus on it's meant to focus on the issues of our world. So I did one presentation on bullying of, or not bullying, the policing of Black American youth and how that leads to, their life and how they live here in America. So it's really about creating awareness. And yeah, we don't have specific support systems. Well, actually, I'm sorry, we do. We have our student communities, and those are students can self-identify into a student community. So they fill out a Google form that one of the other house mothers created, and she's the one who runs that program. And so student communities can meet onto our learning platform and congregate in different types of groups that they identify as. And then we also have a peer circle community and that's more of like a regular accountability meeting. And so we allow students to identify into those groups as well. Thank you for asking.
Thank you for saying. So there's a couple more comments and then I see people sliding off. So this is Marika one more time looking at the chat box. There were questions about, are the Courageous Conversations in person or virtual? And Courtney answered that they're virtual because we're a distance school. What forum do you use? And Courtney answered Canvas, the learning, I never know what LMS stands for, Learning Management System. She helps me out there. So Canvas is the platform where those conversations occur. Kristen, back to you.
Yeah, thanks everyone. It's probably a good time to kind of close, but I'll just close with reminding everyone about the Grand Challenge and considering finding funding for all of these important things, scholarships as well as paying mentors to do the important work we've talked about, etc. So we can hopefully keep putting our heads together and our efforts together to figure out some of these important things. So thanks again, everyone, for attending. And I'll be sending out all of the resources as well in the follow-up email and trying to keep the website up to date as well, which is meant to be an ongoing resource for everyone at equitymidwifery.org.
Thanks, Kristen.
Thank you, Kristen and Marika, so much.
Yeah, thank you, Marika.
Yes, you're welcome, everybody.
And thank you, Courtney, our background helper as well, Courtney Everson.
Yeah. Yeah. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Kristen. Well done as always.
Oh, thanks so much.
Talk to you soon.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.